A Mochi moment from Sadie, who writes, I'm not crying, you're crying. This is what I said during my first appointment with my physician at Mochi, because I didn't have to convince him I needed a GLP-1. He understood, and I felt supported, not judged. I came for the weight loss and stayed for the empathy. Thanks, Sadie. I'm Myra Ahmed, founder of Mochi Health. To find your Mochi moment, visit joinmochi.com.
Sadie is a Mochi member compensated for her story.
On average, you'll have to wait 31 days to see an OBGYN. And if you're dealing with an infection or outbreak, you know you need care fast. That's where WISP comes in. Connect with a U.S. licensed provider online and pick up safe, effective treatment at your local pharmacy that same day. Plus, get birth control and more delivered in all 50 states. Take control with comprehensive sexual and reproductive care, all from your phone. WISP. That's hellowisp.com. The waiting room can wait.
All right, we're back with My Uncle's Escaped Alcatraz with Ken and Mike, episode 61. And today we thought, I was basically walking around this morning and was leafing through the book again, because it's like I have like 10 of these books laying around. So they're like in every room of my house, and the one that's over Ken's shoulder right there. And it just amazes me the amount of work and all of the effort that it's taken to you guys to get to that point. And I had the idea of talking about, because our other podcast host, serial killer whisperer Laura, she just got a book deal for her book based upon her research and studying over the last 10 years with this one serial killer, Lawrence Bittaker. And it took her about 5-6 years to get the deal. We actually assisted in that. And then, it took her a lot of effort to write the book and stuff like that. So it's grueling. I've never written a book. Cindy's written a few, and I see how hard it is. I've written a couple of screenplays, and I almost wanted to blow my head off after that. But I wanted to talk today to you guys about finding out, because with every project, any kind of creative project or any kind of endeavor, something like that, there's always the war-torn stories of just, number one, I know we've talked about how you guys decided to do it, and the origin story of that, where you reached out to him, Mike, and then there had to be some trust going on between the two. You had to earn your trust with Ken. But while you guys started and formed a partnership, I just wanted to hear if there are any kind of great war stories about the obstacles that you guys faced writing this project and writing this book. Because, like I've said before, I mean, the main reason why this book is being taken so seriously is because of all the hard work and the fact it's so sourced, and, it wasn't allowed in Alcatraz, and now it's all over the bookshelves in the bookstore, and they invite you guys up all the time to do book signings and meet people. And you got the last time we were there, you guys got the King's treatment. So let's talk a little bit about that. And, any one of you guys can go first, but like, what are some of the obstacles and the frustrations that you guys encountered while writing this book?
Well, I mean, I can start off, Mike, and can finish it. Probably the biggest obstacle was probably me. I had never written a book in my life. I was like you. I mean, I took a stab at doing a screenplay, which, I did the best I could. I think the biggest, challenge that I had was Mike trying to, take something that he's been doing for quite a while and try to teach an amateur how to creatively write something, and it took me a while. I used to joke that Mike could go off in one night and write 5 chapters, and it would take me months to write one. Mike would email me, "Hey, Ken, are you done with that chapter yet?" And I'm like, I'm working on it. And, it was probably because, if it had not been for Siri and helping me spell stuff, and I tried my best to like do the grammar correctly, you know, as much as I could, but I was constantly asking Siri, how do you spell this? Because I knew what I wanted to say. I just didn't know how to kind of get it out. And, you know, as I went along, I think hopefully Michael, you know, backed me up on this. I think I got better at writing as we went through more and more chapters. To me, that was my biggest challenge piece of it.
Yeah. How was it like being a coach for Ken, a writing coach? Because you come from an academic profession, and you know you speak. I mean, I've you know reading the book, and you speak in complete sentences. Ken and I don't. You know, you're constantly correcting us.
Yeah, I know how to write good. I write good.
And it's definitely a muscle that you have to exercise. That's the thing I do now. It's like, you know, when I write a lot of these pitches and these decks for television shows, and then when we actually produce the shows, I'm actually writing a lot of the content in it, but it's usually just piecing together people's sentences and stuff, but I also have to write narration, and which is different than writing for, you know, exposition, because, you know, someone's going to be speaking it as opposed to reading it. But how did you go about, Mike, prepping and training Ken? Because he was the resource. He was the source of all the origin information, and you know, most people, writers, I'm sure, like you said, it's a solitary, you know, profession for a lot of people, unless you have someone who's your like second brain and you guys can finish each other's sentences. But I don't think you guys were at that point. So how did you get to the point where you got them in shape?
Well, yeah, we can do 10 episodes talking about all this, but cram it into one somehow. I was very fortunate in that Ken had done a lot of the work already, you know, a lot of the photographs, a lot of the documentation. I would say probably about 80% of what's in the book Ken had already done, because he'd been working on it for about 10 years or so. Just not so much for a book, but just collecting everything because he wanted to know who his uncles were and all the stories surrounding them. And when we started seriously thinking about doing a book after we were pursuing television options that didn't quite pan out, and then he started sending me documents, all the information that he had, then it was, you know, I saw the depth of the material that we had to work with. And so probably about 20% of what's, you know, together collaboration wise that we found in the meantime once we decided to write the book, because we wanted to try to find things that hadn't been out there before. So that was one of our challenges, because if you look at, you know, just an average Alcatraz book that talks about the history, you're going to see a lot of the same photographs, for example, or possibly documents that, you know, that are posted online or on different websites, or, you know, if you go to San Francisco, you go to the archives, you know, you're going to see certain things that other people are going to have access to. And so there is some replication, of course. You only have so much information to work with, but we did find things that were in other places that I don't think that I know of that are in other books about Alcatraz, other documents, other photographs. And we tried to keep it as unique as possible. And of course, Ken had the Whitey letters, which was just a goldmine of information that is completely unique. Nobody else has it. Or one of the things that I was really excited about is when he provided the transcript of the trials the brothers had in it was
Alabama
trial, and that's nowhere. You know, he had to get that from Alabama, or not Alabama. Yeah, was it in Montgomery? I'm trying to remember now.
Yeah, it was in Montgomery.
Yeah. Anyway, you know, we have that information where you actually see the transcript of, you know, when they plead guilty to the crime of bank robbery and are sentenced after that. But as far as working with Ken, it was not that bad. It wasn't this terrible experience because it's like, hey, Ken, don't you know how to write? It was never like that. And so what we decided to do to make it easier, and I had actually co-written books before, so I already had that discipline developed, and you learn what works well because you have, you know, that'd be like, you know, you have two creative personalities trying to come up with a common narrative. Like if you had two artists and you say to these artists, okay, paint a painting, well, you have to come to the middle where they're both in agreement with each other. And so the way we approached it was Ken would, write a chapter and he'd send it to me, and I'd, work on it and edit it and kind of tweak it and get it into, book form. And then I would write my chapter and I'd send it to him. And he was more focused on not so much the grammar and the writing and the word usage, but more of, did I get my facts straight? Are we speaking like John and Clarence? Am I sharing the right information? If they went to a certain place, was this the name of the place? Like the school they grew up in, what was the name of the school? So I would ask Ken a lot of detailed questions about, where they grew up and where they lived and what time, when did they arrive in Ruskin from when they were in Georgia before that, things like that. A lot of the detailed information that he had was invaluable. And that really made it a good back and forth as we worked on it together. And then of course, Ken would show the chapters to his family to get their take on it, to see what they thought. And then he would come back to me with notes and ideas and kind of different directions that we took the story. But as far as the writing, for me, it was an enjoyable experience. It was just each chapter when, I would be looking forward to when Ken would send me a chapter, like, what am I going to learn about this time? I
wish I had that gene, that enjoyable writing gene, because for me, it's like, it feels like I'm vomiting, when I'm writing, and it's like, I remember I actually got a chance to meet Francis Ford Coppola at this event where he was speaking at, and he was just, and that's one of the things he talked about, how, everybody thinks, because he won Oscars for his writing before, and stuff like that. So, and the one thing I wanted to ask him is just like, what was it like? Is it easy for you? Because it's not easy for me. He goes, no, it's not easy at all. It's not easy for me at all. Because he was the one who used it, because it's like, I feel like I'm throwing up, and it's like, and I throw up and then I walk away from it. And I think I just got throw up on the page, and I come back and I read it after several hours. And I'm like, oh, it's not throw up. It's, tweak this, tweak that. So, the fact that, like Cindy, she types like 100 words a minute. It's just like crazy fast. And her brain moves so fast. And I don't operate that way. So I'm really jealous of someone like yourself, Mike, who can that it's relaxing for you. It's because it's like, I'm just like rewriting, like I'll spew and then I'll go back and rewrite it and I'll spew. I try to stay in the flow, but my flow is so organized. The grammar goes everywhere. So I let it flow, and then I go back and edit. But it sounds like you're like in a driver's seat and you're just driving.
Yes, to a point, because one of the things that if anybody out there is thinking about writing, I'm sure there are a few people like, hey, I can write a book. One of the things you have to learn not to do is, and this is our tendency for me when I was first starting out writing, I did this too, is you tend to not critique, but sort of correct yourself as you write. You write a sentence like, oh, I need to fix that, and then you stop and you fix it, and then you go on to the next sentence and the next, and then you read a paragraph, like, oh, I should fix that paragraph before I move on, kind of a thing. You're editing as you go, and that's like going downhill in a car and putting it in reverse. That's
what Ken and I do. He was like, he was on Siri every 5 seconds, editing himself.
And it's so tempting to do that because you want to make it right the first time, and it'll never be right the first time. We're not Mozart where we just write it and it's perfect and we walk away and it's done. You just, like you said, you get into the flow, you just start writing. Who cares? Good, bad, awful, great. Just get it on the page. And then you walk away, let it sort of cool off a little bit, sort of forget about it a little bit. And then you come back like Coppola does, and he goes back to it. It's like, okay, now I'm going to start editing. Now I'm in editing mode, and I'm going to go through the chapter. It's like, what works, what doesn't work, what's not clear, what do I need to add, what needs to go. This is Does that all happen in your head? Because if you see right behind me, there's a bunch of index cards in there, and that's another project that Cindy's working on right now, where she's writing. And for us in our, it's always worked for me because I'm very visually oriented. I have to, before I even write, I'll block it out like this.
I'll block it out in cards, and I'll have like cards all over the walls before I even go, because I can't because I have to organize everything in my head up on a wall first before I sit down. So like when I'm writing, it's like I can reference the wall behind me to make sure that I'm on track and that my structure is going where I know it. And obviously the reason they're on cards is because then you can move them around and you can edit them there. So like you'll see, like when I have cards on the wall on a project, I'm usually staring at it like a mental patient, when I'm just kind of not writing, just trying to let it through osmosis come through. But for you, I mean, do you have like a notebook, or do you create an outline, or are you just kind of going through like it's a term paper where you have all this research and this data and this information, and then you kind of know, all right, well, this is how I do it, because I don't know how to do that.
Well, my approach, and every writer has a different approach. You talk to one writer, this is how you write, this is the best way to write, and then you talk to somebody else and it's just the opposite. Some people, they list every moment, every scene, every element in the chapter. Others are like, I have 3 or 4 ideas and I just go with them, kind of a thing. And so it just depends on what your personality is and what works best for you. For me, what I do is each chapter that we wrote was sort of like a mini book. There was a beginning and an end to each chapter. We'd always have a little hook at the end that would, like make you turn the page, hence the page turner kind of an idea for books. So there'd always be like the next thing to kind of lead to the next chapter, but each chapter had a beginning, middle, and end, so that there was one basic idea that was moving that chapter, whatever it was, whether it be.
And they're relatively small chapters too. So they're like, you did it. Was that intentional? Because that's what made it really move fast for me. Because they're almost like bite-sized chapters. They were just enough, because I only had the manuscript that you texted me. So I was reading it on my phone like every night. Like I would read like a chapter, and then we would come on and we'd talk about it. And I felt that really kind of helped me absorb the information and really feel the flow better. Was that intentional?
Absolutely. Yeah. Because if you look at because what I do is when I read a book, I'll read a chapter, and I'm a paper book guy. I like to hold my books. I don't like reading books on a phone. So I'm old school. And so I always see, well, how long is this chapter? Oh, 32 pages. Oh, that's a long chapter. And it just sort of feels sort of overwhelming. I was like, I don't know if I can sit through 32 pages, in one sitting. But if it's a chapter that's 12, 15 pages, that's more doable. That's more bite-sized. And it's like, oh, I can get through that. And of course, then our book has a lot of, photographs and documents included. So even though it could be, say, 15 pages, it could only be, say, 12 pages of actual text and, a little bit more of the visual elements within the book. But what I do is, when I map out a chapter, I have what's the main idea that's pushing that chapter that we really want to talk about. And then I'll have like the 3 or 4 or 5 different points that are in that chapter that need to be made. And so it's sort of like for me, it's like the mental Post-it notes that you have behind you. It's like, okay, things need to be in the chapter. One leads to 2, 2 leads to 3, 3 leads to 4. And then you just have the narrative that you have in that chapter. And then the next chapter is like, okay, what is this chapter going to be about? And what elements do we need to bring into that chapter? What stories do we need? What photos do we need? What anecdotes are we looking for? What FBI reference are we going to include? The things it's the supporting documentation that makes that chapter real and verified of the things that we're discussing. That everything that we said was always backed up with some kind of either visual or written document.
Yeah, because it's not a novel and it's not fiction, so you're not making it up. So it's like you have to stay true to whatever sources you have, and then you have to package it in a way that it makes sense for the audience and they understand it, but that also holds their interest dramatically as well.
Right.
So
I also kind of felt like that as we were writing it, Mike didn't really kind of know any of the characters in the book, like my grandfather and uncles and aunts. And I remember he wrote a chapter that had my grandfather in it. I think it was the very first chapter he was in it. And I wrote back to him. I said, Mike, that's not how my grandfather would have talked. I
was just going to ask that. Was there anything where you're like, hey, Lou, hey, wait a minute, stop.
Yeah, he's not that, that soft spoken that you made him this Christian type attitude. I mean, he did go to church. He did believe in taking his family to church, but he was a very stern individual. I mean, he was a good man. He was, I can sit right now and even in my mind, I can hear him speak. And so I know what kind of a person he was. And once I started kind of telling Mike about, okay, this is how he would act. This is how my grandmother would talk. And it wasn't hard really to kind of build John and Clarence and how they would have spoke, because all of my uncles pretty much spoke the same way. I mean, they all grew up together. They were very close-knit family. So just looking at how my two older uncles than they were, how they spoke and how they carried themselves and the jokes that they would tell, and then pairing that with like how my mom would tell me about stories about John and Clarence and Alfred, I relate that to Mike. And then Mike, I think, started getting that. I believe it helped him in writing the character.
Absolutely.
Because then he started seeing this picture. And it's one of the reasons why I've said that other books that have been written about Alcatraz, I don't think they really captured the essence of the brothers.
How could they? How could they? There's no one could capture the essence like a family member who actually, you have the, you have their blood in you, and you have, and you lived it, and you saw it, and you smelled it, and you tasted it, and all those things. There's no replacement for that.
No, and Mike did a great job. I mean, I remember when he finally cut me off and said, "Okay, we can't write anymore." I think it was like 500 pages, right, Mike?
It was over 500 pages. I think it was like 550 or something like that.
Yeah,
they're not going to produce a book 500 pages long, and I was like, I still had more to talk about. And,
yeah, of course. Well, listen, that's what we've been doing for last year.
and
yours is like 382 without the postscript.
Yeah, we had to pare it down to like in half.
Yeah,
and I was devastated. I was like, oh my gosh, we worked on this for years. And
so, what did you have to throw out? What didn't you include in the book, or did you just kind of pare it down and just kind of wedge it in so it all fit in that 382?
There was a lot of just trimming of information. We had a lot more photos and documents that we took out, and we would just sort of talk about them. I mean, nothing that was critical. I mean, the most critical things stayed in the book. They were more kind of the peripheral kinds of things. Like, for example, there was a lot more about the whole MK Ultra experience that Alfred and Whitey experienced. So there was a lot of more of that. And I as I thought about it, because one of the things about a book, as I often say to people, is you don't know what the book's about until you get to the last page. Because books tend to change, they tend to adapt as you go. You have new ideas, or things you thought worked don't really work, and so you're kind of tweaking it and sort of evaluating what works best and what doesn't work. And so in the end, when we were finished, obviously the brothers are the main thrust of the whole book, their life story. And for Alfred, he's a part of the story, of course. He has his contributions to the escape, and both directly and indirectly. But when we started talking more about MK Ultra, for example, I thought that's kind of more of a peripheral story. It's not really directly related. It's the kind of thing that made them who they were, especially Whitey. He talked a lot about how MK Ultra really worked very negatively against him, and he just had a lot of issues as a result of that. And it's like, well, it's interesting, but it's not really directly related to Alcatraz or the escape. So it's like that had to go.
Yeah. No, I get it. And it's a fascinating subject. And as we speak, I mean, some of the document dumps that the Trump administration is doing, that's one of the document dumps they're doing, is the MK Ultra experiments.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So
would be interesting to go through.
Yeah. And, I haven't read this book yet. I've been meaning to read this book for the past, 5 or 6 years. It's the, I forget what it's called, Chaos, written by Tom O'Neill. And it was a guy who was, and I think I spoke about this on a previous podcast, and he was I'm not sure if he was a writer for Rolling Stone, and he was researching MK Ultra for an article, and then he just never finished the article, and just did a 20-year kind of research project on this, and it took him 20 years to write this book on the whole MK Ultra experimentation that the CIA was doing, the government was doing with Charles Manson, with Whitey Bulger, with all the federal prisoners. Basically there's like, listen, if you do this experiment, you can shorten your time, that kind of thing. So it was when I read that in your book, it was just like, whoa. And I was like, okay, there's a lot of connective tissue here. But also I did see the same thing. I was just like, I wanted to hear more, but I understand why you had to reduce that, because it was kind of it was a sideline that was happening along the way. And it wasn't relevant to the escape, wasn't relevant to how they escaped or where they ended up. I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think John and Clarence were in any of those programs. They didn't do the MK Ultra experience. So
I would probably say the only connection with it would have been Alfred.
Yeah, that's the whole thing.
Alfred was definitely, involved in it. It seemed like, from what we have from the newspaper letter or the newspaper article that they had at Kilby Prison, that same drug program followed him to Kilby. It started like the week before he died. So, is it possible that that's what they used on him to make him talk? I don't know. I've always found this very interesting about Alfred. And the reason I keep bringing him into the story is that, if you look at the FBI files, and I've said this before, it's about the escape from Alcatraz. Everything they detailed in there has something to do with the escape from Alcatraz, the three men. I've never understood why they have the death of Alfred in those files.
Yeah.
If it was not somehow related to the escape and they wanted it recorded, because he's the only member of the family that's ever been included. And they go into great detail about how he died and how the family suspected something had happened to him. It's like, why in the world is this in the FBI files for the escape from Alcatraz? What does that have? Anybody, the first time I read it, I thought, what does this have to do with the escape from Alcatraz? Until we really started digging into Alfred. And, they undoubtedly, they put it in there, the FBI, because they believed it was related to it.
Yeah. Other than the way Mike was writing the dialogue or the voice for some of your relatives, like your grandfather and stuff like that, were there any other kind of points where you guys were debated about, or was it just like, was it pretty like, you would suggest something, Mike or Ken, like, no, we can't do that, and like that? What was that like, the give and take of information? Because, especially when you get deep into it, Mike, when you're writing, you start really kind of developing a vision for how the book's laying out. And, and then that, knowing, in creative endeavors, it's just you two. Usually when, Cindy and I are doing it, we have to, we have like 6 or 7 other people we got to, include on the layers that we have to deal with as far as getting approval on creative and, and hopefully they like what, like I said, I'm as good as my first cut. Like, I get of an episode or a documentary. It's like my first cut is my first cut, that I can do it exactly the way I want it. And if they like it, that's good. And then I'm like, all right, I'll just move forward. But if they don't, then it's just like, it's the notes from hell. And it's just like, then it's like everybody is kind of putting their creative spin on it. And some people like just pushing peas around a plate just because they want to be relevant. Other people are actually have some really good notes and is moving the ball forward. But what was that like that for you guys? Because it was just you guys until you guys had an editor, right?
Well, we did have an editor, but that was later.
Mm-hmm.
So I was 100% dependent on Ken for all this information. I mean, like I said, I did find some information, some documentation, some photos on my own while we were researching chapters. Like I said, trying to find more unique sources to include in the book that are not as commonly referenced. And one of the things that you asked me a long time ago was, what other books did we read as we were preparing for this one? And I said none, because I didn't want to be influenced by those other books and draw from their experiences and their stories.
That's a double-edged sword, because I do that too. It's like I won't watch an episode of something if it's similar to what I'm doing. I don't want to be polluted with images, and I want to at least get my own take on it. So yeah, no, that's a real thing.
Yeah, and so Ken, like I said, I would send my chapters to him, and then he would either look at them directly or he would talk to other people and then come back with his notes to clean it up or make it more authentic as the characters were, the things that they experienced. Like, for example, when we started in the first chapter, when I gave it to Ken, it starts off kind of more in a traditional way that a biography, or not a biography, but a historical account is. You're sort of a mile up looking down and just describing the things that are happening. You're sort of speaking for them in a omniscient voice. And when I sent it to Ken, he said, no, that's not what I want for this book. I want the readers to be right there with the characters, with my uncles and the other characters. I want to know what they're saying. I want everyone to know what they're feeling and what they're thinking, and we're just coming alongside. So, and that actually worked for me, because I come from a mostly fiction background of writing books. I've written previous novels. So I know what it's like to sort of create those kinds of backgrounds and psychologies for a character, and just being right with them and the way that they talked and the experiences they've had. And so he wanted that kind of a presentation of his uncles. And so I said, okay. So I went back and rewrote the first chapter, and this one, where it starts off where you're right there with them in the escape. They flip the lid off the top of the cell block. They're running to the edge of the
fly in the wall.
Room.
You were flies in the wall while this is happening.
Exactly, and that's exactly what Ken wanted. He says, so we, while factually it's accurate, we do take some liberties, and we have a little disclaimer at the beginning of the book where we talk about this, that it's not a pure biography or historical account. We're sort of reading into a little bit of, if they're sitting there in the prison wall thinking about the escape, what would they have said?
Sure.
And so we're including some of that dialogue that is sort of anticipating what it was like for them, the kinds of things that they were talking about based on the information that we had. But the things that did happen were based on, on the facts that we did dig up. So that was definitely a direction that Ken wanted. And then from the first chapter, we just, went with that, very specifically. Yeah.
It was funny. I wanted to bring up something that just came to mind, because I was talking to our mutual friend, Cheryl Mack McCullum, last week, and we were talking about you guys, and we were talking about Alcatraz, and I had no idea that she knew Robert Schiebling.
Oh, I didn't either.
Yeah. She has a picture. He gave her a picture of, and apparently there's that one picture that's in the book where you see the backs of the guys sitting at in the cafeteria, and they're sitting down, and Robert Schiebling is, and there's an arrow, and he points at, he goes, that's me, and that's John, and that's Clarence. So he was sitting in between them.
Oh, wow. We're gonna have to definitely look back at those photos. I was not aware of that.
Yeah. I'll send it to you.
It's the one, because there are several photos that
it's in color too. It's a color photo.
Yeah, there are several photos that we have of the inmates in the dining hall, and there's one where they're all sitting down, and there's sort of a guard sort of looking down on them, and there's another
he's
where
kind of like right in
that's standing up.
Yeah,
that's waiting to be seated at the table. So that's Robert Schiebling.
Yeah.
Okay, and John and Clarence are at that table.
Yep.
Okay.
Now, can you see their face?
No, it's just behind. That's why he writes it on. He writes it on the picture on marker. He goes, "This is me. This is John. This is Clarence," and he signs it to Cheryl. And she was at his funeral. On Alcatraz, I guess there was like some sort of ceremony on Alcatraz. She was because apparently she was pretty, like, after she went. I don't know how I can't remember the origin story and how she met him, but she's physically, because we were on a Zoom call and she showed me the picture. So I'll have to pull it up. I'll do a frame grab and send it to you guys. But I was like, wow.
I would love to see that.
Yeah. And because you were on her podcast, she never even mentioned it?
No, I never heard of it.
It was interesting. But I was like, wow.
Yeah. So and this is what we were talking about, the research as we were doing. I swear that we came across a photo of taken in the yard in April of 1962, and I am almost certain that is John and Clarence and Frank Morris and another individual who you can't see his face sitting at the top of the wall. I mean, it would have been exactly where they would have probably been seating it. Yeah.
The other thing that she said is that Schiebling confirmed that pretty much most of the prison population all knew what was going on and they all assisted. Yeah. That was the one thing.
And definitely in some way, you know, I mean, well, you got to think, you got 50 raincoats. you know, a lot of people had to be involved to get the raincoat.
Absolutely.
I mean, you're not going to give up your raincoat without going, okay, what's this for? You know, they might have heard about it and then they just decided to keep quiet, and that they didn't want to be the ones, you know, spilling the beans and getting these men caught. Things that we did find, which it was just a perfect timing, was I had signed up for access to be able to research old newspapers, and because I had always heard, you know, from Fred Breezy that he grew up with the boys, but it was just his word. I did later, though, find out Uncle Man, you know, remembered him. But then we came across several newspaper articles where Fred Breezy and John and Clarence were actually in one of the boys' reform school at the exact same time. So, I mean, you could definitely start backing up all this research. And when I would run across these items that I would find, I'd send them to Mike, and then we'd have to go back or he would have to go back and make little changes, because we would go, okay, we need to include this piece in there.
Yeah.
It's very relevant. We have, you know, it's not like just us saying that Fred Breezy and John and Clarence and Alfred were friends early on.
Exactly.
Now we have proof that they actually, you know, knew each other, lived in the same town, got in trouble together.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things I want to ask you. Did you guys have any knockdown drag-outs about, as far as what wanted to be in the book? Because Mike, I know you now. I've known you for like over a year now. You are a stickler for facts and details. Yeah. So, you know, for me, it's just like, I'm a stickler for facts and details too, but you know, I will, you know, I'm not going to compromise the storytelling for it. You know, if it's you know, but for you, it's gotta be black and white. And so I would imagine, was there anything that Ken was pitching you that you were like, I don't know if we can put that in there. We can't say we don't have this or anything like that. Were there any of those situations?
Two. One of them was
he has them itemized.
I think there were more than two.
I like the fact that he has the top two.
Top two. One of them was Ken wanted a little bit more of a Kennedy connection into the story.
I did.
That we've, you know, it's been broached a number of times, and we talked about, I think even last week, about, you know, possibly what the brothers might see in Mexico with Oswald and Jack Ruby. And for me, while that's interesting and it's a possibility, it's like, it's all speculation. And so there was, you know, so like with the Kennedy thing, it's like it does kind of fit the facts, but it's speculation. You can't really pin it down to exact details and information. And so I tend to shy away from those ideas because we want to get past just our own little personal beliefs about something. And can we document it? Is there evidence that corroborates it, at least partially? It's something that is, you can hold up and say, this is the thing that's saying this is true, or at least very possibly true. I'm more comfortable with that. And the second one is Ken is much more of a proponent of the letters that were taken in the day after the escape. there's a photograph the FBI took of the letters that are on John's little writing board or writing thing. And in the FBI report, it talks about how all the that when they found the pouch, the photographs were taken, were in the pouch, and addresses and information that specifically leads to John and Clarence. There's nothing there about Frank Morris at all in the pouch. And in the FBI report, at one point it says a letter was in the pouch, and then in another part of the FBI report, it says
letters.
Letters, it's plural, but it
letters, plural.
Yes, I can't remember if it says 2 letters or letters, but anyway,
it's in the very first volume, and actually, it's the very first document where they discover the pouch. And it says letters. It says letters. I'm not even sure it says photos. It says letters. And then there's an FBI report where they are taking the items that were in the pouch and sending them off along with other items to be examined. I'm assuming by some lab somewhere.
Yeah.
And one of the items in there lists letters, 11 letters that they were sending in this package of stuff that they were going to have analyzed. So, and
those are the letters that you've been asking to get back, correct? Those are
the letters. When it says letters, they've only been referenced twice in the FBI files. We do see the photo, of John's cell with those letters, and I can vouch and tell you, we never got those. The family never got those letters back. You can look at the inventory card that when they sent John and Clarence's items back to the family, to their mom and dad, those letters were not listed as items that were sent back. So, they still have those letters today. And I even question too, like the contents of that pouch. It's one of the items in the pouch is a receipt. It was made out to Clarence for $5 that my grandmother sent him. Sent him $5, and they
put it on his books, right?
Put it into the account. They would put the receipt in the letter, which is probably where it stayed. I mean, why would he want to take his receipt for $5 with him in that pouch? It was more or less they just grabbed the letters that were in his credenza and the letters that were in John, and they shoved them in those pouches, and they threw them in the water. And then when they opened them up, oh, look, here's a receipt for $5 for Clarence, where his mom sent him, $5, and they put it. Why would you need that if you were escaping?
No, it's garbage.
No, exactly. And I go back to, none of these letters were that important to John and Clarence. They could have gotten letters and photos from, once they got wherever they were going, Uncle Man could have given them all the letters and photos that they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
None of that was important to them. And, clearly you can see that information in the cell the next morning. Now, how it ends up into the bay, that's where, I wanted to bring more of that into the book.
See, I'm not as convinced that it was staged. I mean, it is possible that it was staged. And so Ken and I, we talked about it more than once. But one of the things I told him from the very beginning and would sort of remind him from time to time as we were doing the book was, this is your story. It's not my story. You have final say over everything. If you say you want this, then we're going to do it. I would have my concerns and say, well, I don't think so, or maybe we can do more like this. And sometimes Ken would say, yeah, and other times like, no, I want to do it this way. And it's like, okay, we're going to do it that way then. So we did put a reference to it. And so I softened it a little bit. But like I said, I'm not as convinced that they staged it. I'm open to the idea that they could have staged it. But again, it's like, it's just speculation. We don't have anything that definitively tells us either way. So it's like, I'll put it in there or we put it in there. But that was Ken really wanted it in there. So it ended up in the book.
Yeah.
So, the one thing that really, and when I first, I looked at that photo of John's cell so many times. Never really even paid attention to those letters until we started doing the research. And then I remember I snapped a photo. I took and snipped it out the raincoat sleeve that is laying on top of the letters. And the letters or the pouch was described as a raincoat sleeve that had been sewed together. And so I snipped out, didn't show the letters, and I sent it to Art. Art had told me one time, Art and Michael Esslinger both told me they had seen the pouch at the archives one time, and I believe Mike said he's even seen the letters or the photos, might have been the photos, but I showed them that pouch or that sleeve. And I said, is this what you saw at the archives? And both of them came back and told me that looked very similar to what they saw. So there again, that piece of, raincoat sleeve is sitting in John's cell the next morning.
So I just looked up the FBI file real quick as you were talking, and this is what the FBI file says. It says, in addition, these boats have recovered from water what has been described as waterproof bag containing several letters, some of which mention the names Angland and Morris. So it said several letters, which to me is a relatively small number.
Yeah,
not 10 or 20.
Well, how many is several? I mean, if you say couple, I'd say two.
A couple could be 2 or 3. Several. I think you're in between 5 and 10.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you can look at John's thing and you can see probably 10.
Oh, there's a lot of letters. There's probably 20 letters there.
Yeah.
In his cell.
Yeah.
Afterward. So anyway, like I said, it's not pinned down. It's speculation, and so it's like I'm still open, but I'm not completely convinced that they staged the
if you look at the contents again, so you think one thing that caught my mind when I read the FBI several times was the pieces of paper that were inside of this pouch listing addresses and phone numbers of people throughout the country that the FBI actually contacted, and every single one of them said, I don't know anybody at Alcatraz, don't know John and Clarence or Frank Morris. But my question is, how in the world would 3 inmates in Alcatraz that doesn't have access to a phone book, that doesn't have access to a phone, how did they get these addresses that they wrote down supposedly on a piece of paper with phone numbers, and it's inside this pouch? If they only
how many people are we talking about?
There was like a dozen throughout the country, not just in California. We're talking about in other states. So explain to me how they were able to get hold of multiple phone books and get addresses of people, random people with addresses and phone numbers. And then, the FBI tracks down and asks them, how did they get a hold of something like that?
That's interesting.
I mean, to me, that's a mystery in itself there.
There was so much going on in that short period of time that they were there. And it sounds like they used every second for something. They didn't waste any time.
I believe that the letters and the photos of family members were that important to John and Clarence.
Yeah.
I mean, they could have gotten other letters. I just cannot believe that they thought, we've got to take this with us.
Yeah. So that you guys didn't have any kind of knockdown, drag out fights because Mike conceded most of the time. Just say, it's your story. It's your story.
No, Mike
was for most of it.
Yeah, there was never me, we don't need to follow this path.
Man, that's amazing that you guys barely knew each other and were able to create that sort of creative flow because we'd
known each other for several years at this point. And that was all done remotely, either phone calls or Zoom calls, or a lot of emails, lots and lots of emails back and forth. So we actually didn't meet until we did Expedition Unknown. That's when we actually met. So that was in 2022. So I was introduced to Ken in 2015. So it was 7 years later.
Wow. So that's great. Well, it was meant to be.
It was meant to be.
when you say it like that, you know?
Now, one of the things I want to mention, because I think you'd asked at the very beginning, so what were some of the obstacles to overcome? I mean, there were a lot of obstacles, but one of them for me was I had pinned a lot of hopes on our trip to Brazil through the show back in 2022 that we would find them or find some really solid evidence of, tracking their trail or family members, something that would really connect, or go to the farmhouse, because we knew we were going to go to the town where the photograph was taken in 75 by Fred Breezy. And we were going to go to the town, and we were going to go to the farmhouse and the farm and all that, because we were starting to work on the book at this point. We were kind of interrupted when Ken got the phone call, email from one of the producers of Expedition Unknown saying, hey, we were thinking about maybe doing an Alcatraz episode. And so I was like, great, now we can try to end this thing, get a solid ending. And then when the episode didn't quite pan out that way, and we were mostly finished with writing the chapters, we still had some editing and revisions to do, of course, but getting the first draft done, I thought, in my mind, this was a problem because it didn't have the hard ending that I was wanting for the story. It was a soft ending. Yeah. We had more information. We found the penny. We found, we heard the stories about the three Americans hiding there, and we went to the places where the photographs were taken. We went to the house. We couldn't see. We were looking at it from a distance, and there's a shot of Josh holding up the photograph from 75, comparing the geography and the house and all that. And that's tantalizing leads that we had. And I thought, well, how long is it going to be before we get that ending that we want, where it's definitive and there's no disputing what happened to them? I thought it could be years before that happens. Are we going to just sit on the book for years? And I thought, well, let's just write it to the best of our ability. Let's give it the ending that we have now, where we sort of lay out all of our information and just say, if this was a court case, would you find this, guilty or not guilty?
Yeah.
And then pitch it to publishers. Although we didn't go straight to publishers, I knew if we were going to get a decent publisher for the book, we would need a literary agent, because you can go to small publishers without an agent and they'll do it, but they don't have much of a reach and they're not going to give you a lot of support to promote the book. And so we needed a bigger publisher to do that. And so then it was a matter of sending out the query letters and the book proposals to agents. Well, we sent out hundreds of them, to different ones. And in the end, after months and months and months of sending and getting some interest of, oh, send it to me, I'll check it out, and it just wasn't for them, we only had 2 agents that really were excited about the book. Like, I want to work with you with this. I want to try to get this thing published. And between the 2, we chose who we picked. That's still our agent. And then when she started sending it to the publishers, she was getting a lot of the rejection letters, or not letters, but rejections from them. And, knowing my background in publishing, you send out a batch to publishers and then you get the replies. And after maybe a month or 2 or 3 or 4, you send out another batch, and you just keep doing it in batches until you find one that's willing to work with you and buy the book. Well, she was, she's starting to get the rejections. And I said, oh, that's okay. What's the next batch you're going to send? When are you going to send it? And she goes, there is no other batch. This is it. There's nobody else that I know of that is going to be interested in this book. I've already sent it. So now we're just waiting to get our reply. Well, finally, I think it was the next to the last one that finally said, yeah, we want to publish it. So all but one said no. All but one said yes. Yeah. So we were down to the wire. First, it took us a long time to find an agent. And then once we found the agent, then we almost exhausted all the publishers that could have possibly published the book. Yeah. The one, and that's the one that ended up doing it. So this, we literary wise, we just kind of made it in by the skin of our teeth to find a publisher.
That's the way it goes. Just story my life. It's always the second to last one. It's just like, and you're just when you're about to give up. Yep. That's usually what they say. That's usually the problem, is that a lot of people do give up, and the ones who succeed are just hang on just for a little bit longer.
When we were even talking about when it seemed like we weren't going to get a publisher through our agent, that Ken and I were even saying, well, I guess we're going to have to self-publish this. We didn't write this book and put all this time and energy into it. just to say, oh, well, it didn't work out, move on.
Well, yeah, the landscape's a little different now. You can actually do that and be successful at it. There's been a lot of self-published authors now books have been made into movies and stuff like that. So
I'm really hoping when we go back down to Brazil that we can put an ending to the story,
an addendum to this.
Yes.
Well, but see, now I have since changed my thoughts about that, because like I said, I was a little disappointed that we had a soft ending and not a hard ending to the story. But if we had the end of the story where we said, here's the family, here's the DNA, here's absolute proof they lived in Brazil and are buried there now, then we never would have done this podcast, because it would be case closed. We're still trying to find the final answers. It lends itself to other projects that, and we can't go into details, but we're pursuing other means to tell the story that people are considering at this time. And that's because I think there's not that hard ending. So this actually has given it more life than if we hadn't.
Yeah. Well, listen, I mean, when we were at Alcatraz in the gift shop with the books and stuff like that, I was shocked how many books were written about the island. I was shocked. All different kind of genres as far as like perspectives. Like, we pulled out and we talked a little bit about the girl who lived on the island because her father was a guard there, and then went back and got married there, and then she wrote a book about it. Well, I mean, it's not a big book, but it's a little thing. But everything from that to things that happened on the island. I mean, there were so many. So it's definitely, I mean, the Alcatraz brand, is pretty strong, and getting and kind of segueing into how strong it is, the idea that the goofy idea that Trump has to try to reopen it. We all thought it was just kind of a publicity stunt. But like last week, Mike sent me the article, and then as soon as you sent me that article, it was on the news. I'm like scrolling, I hit it, and I looked up, and it was on the news. I'm like, and Pam Bondi's there, and some other people from the government taking it. They were standing right where we were, right outside the dungeon area. They're in that same wing. They were standing right where we were, talking about how they're evaluating reopening this thing and taking it back as a and making it a facility. And then you have the alligator Alcatraz. It's you can't get away from Alcatraz in the last few months. No. So it's definitely interesting how the timing of all this, and hopefully we'll have some good news soon about even more, another project that we're doing with this, that, hopefully that we can share a lot of the findings that we've been working on for the past year. And, but yeah, I mean, it just doesn't seem to go away.
Well, and actually what happened was, I live in the Bay Area, so obviously it was big news for me, because all the media outlets locally were covering. Of course, it was a national and probably an international story in some areas. But
it's always an international story. I'm just telling you right now, because Cindy, she used to work for France 24. She was a journalist there, and so she's got the European wire, and it shows up all the time.
Well, what we didn't know at the time was, so they had the big news, with Bondi and the couple of other representatives from DC there with her, being shown around. And somebody, it was a KTVU. It's a local TV station. They reached out to the publisher of the book and said, we'd like to have Ken do an interview talking about her visit and reopening Alcatraz, and do you think it's going to happen? And we didn't get it until the next day. They for some reason they sent the email to me. They got to the agent, and the agent sent me the email. I responded to the producer at KTVU, and it said, yeah, we'd love to talk about this. Here's Ken's contact information. And so she contacted Ken, and then was it the same day or the day after that you did?
It was same day that evening. I believe it was 5:30 your time.
Yeah, it was 5:30 our time. Yeah, they did a like a 7.5 minute interview on the news of Ken talking about Alcatraz, and well, you can take it from there about what he talked about. It was a good
Yeah.
interview.
Well, do you have the clip? Can you send me the clip? I'd love to throw it up on our.
Well, so I'm waiting for her to put it on their Facebook page.
Got it.
She told me
forward it
that,
to me when you get it. I'll distribute it.
She let me know once they put it out there. They're a little bit kind of behind, but I told Mike, I said I remember doing an interview at the TV station here in Panama City Beach where I live, and I didn't realize that they were only going to give me like 2 minutes to talk, so I crammed as much as I could in 2 minutes. I came prepared, and I knew what was going to happen on this one. I figured the same way, and I told Mike I was going to make sure I covered this podcast, the book.
Get the plugs in. The book, the podcast.
I covered as much as I could. In fact, I don't think I even gave her. She might have said 2 things.
Good.
I was talking the whole time.
That's good.
She barely even got in a word in.
Listen, if anything, this podcast does, it gives people media training.
Yeah.
Well, the producer said that she thought it was a great interview, and Ken did a great job. My wife and I were watching it, and it was, like I said, it was 7.5 minutes. I was surprised they gave him that much time during the broadcast. And she sent an email to Ken saying, thanks, great interview, and I'm going to go out and get the book. Now she wants to read it.
Yeah, she wanted to read the book.
I don't know who. It's like, people just go buy the book. Just go buy the book. It's like, because we've talked about it for a year. This is 61 episodes. There's still a lot of things in this book that we haven't covered.
No, we have not covered it.
That's the crazy part about this whole thing, and the fact that it spurred all of this new investigation that we've been doing, and it's been crazy. It's been a crazy ride, but it's been a fascinating ride, and hopefully we'll have some good news soon. So that's all we can say right now. I wish I could talk about it all today, but that's all we have to talk about today. All right, guys. Thanks for sharing.
All right.
Great stuff. Sorry, I was hoping to get like a good story about you guys going to fisticuffs over a chapter, and
sorry, no juicy story to tell
on the Golden Gate Bridge. It's like going over. But all right, guys. All right. Well, listen, we'll see you next week.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold! Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
It's summer. Time to enjoy long days, lazy nights, and great food. Because Uber Eats has deals all summer long. So, when hunger strikes, don't sweat it. Delicious deals are just a tap away on Uber Eats. Enjoy all your favorite grocery items delivered straight to you. Get ice cream, soda, and snacks from your favorite stores like Wegmans and CVS, and make the most of every moment. Now that sounds like a good summer. Order now on Uber Eats. Terms apply. Product availability varies by region. See app for details.
How do you top your love for your cat? With a cascade of decadent savory gravy over a mouth-watering mousse pâté. Fancy Feast gems. 2 gourmet pâtés in 1 convenient pack. Simply peel and plate to reveal a pyramid shape that makes eating delightful, and pamper her with an experience as extraordinary as she is. Turn the everyday into the extraordinary with Fancy Feast gems.
What does every USAA member have in common? Family. We're one big family who supports the military community and their eligible families. And if you, your parent, or spouse served, you could join our family and save big on auto insurance. Visit USAA.com/join today to check your eligibility. Membership eligibility and product restrictions apply and are subject to change. USAA means United Services Automobile Association and its affiliates, San Antonio, Texas.